Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to how Bitcoin, or rather cryptocurrency wallets in general, work. There seems to be some confusion around it. I was talking to some clients and some friends about it recently, and so I'm going to explain how it works and probably also go into some details about how hardware wallets work and kind of some of the distinctions for you. So before we do that, if you have not already, please click the subscribe button. We love subscribers. It's very helpful for us. If you enjoy our videos, please share them with your friends. We really appreciate that as well. And if you're interested in paying the lowest legal amount of tax possible, protecting your assets, forming offshore companies, opening offshore bank accounts, getting foreign residencies, citizenships, passports, or investing abroad, please reach out to us. You can book a call with me, clarity.fm/Michael Rosmer. There's a link below, or you can check out our websites, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so the reason I'm going to do like a whole little series of videos on some specifics around cryptocurrency, because of the fact that I think cryptocurrency in general is a very important topic right now. First of all, we're coming into a time when the rate of return is probably going to be quite high. So I've allocated a bunch of my own personal money there, and I'm generally advising clients to put a portion of their money in specific investments. And I've done some videos about that already. So that's the one thing. The second is increasingly the financial system is a liability. They have weaponized it. They are trying to lock it down. I just had a friend over here last night who is a banker, and we were having some conversation. We were just discussing what's going on in the banking system and how, especially in Europe, he's a European banker, they're making it very, very difficult to do transactions. People who have done the same transactions month after month for years are now having their transactions held up and going through some process, and it's causing issues with suppliers. And he's furious because these are his clients, and the AML people say they don't care, and all this kind of thing. It's very asinine, and I'm going to do a video in the future about added regulations they're bringing in. At the moment, Europe is probably the worst, but the truth is Hong Kong is having issues. If you're doing international transactions, you can have issues in the US. Across the world, and then offshore jurisdictions, of course, that's a whole other thing. So in general, this is a challenge, and cryptocurrencies to some extent help you to get around it, okay? It's very easy to transact with cryptocurrencies. You can store money in cryptocurrencies that are extremely stable. I'll probably do some videos on that for you as well. And so I think it's an important subject to know about at the moment because of kind of the changing dynamics of the world. So how does this work? So when you have cryptocurrencies, you store them in what's called a wallet, okay? Now, this is a very deceptive term. There's this concept of the blockchain, and I'll do another video explaining how blockchain in general works. But just think of it like kind of the internet, okay? So basically what it is it's actually a shared database, okay? So you have many, many computers which are all storing the same thing, and the way that they connect with each other and how they register transactions or information and changes to that common set of data, that common data store, is what makes up this blockchain thing, okay? Now, so what happens is your money is stored on this decentralized, what we call decentralized ledger technology, okay? Decentralized because there's many different parties, there's no single point of failure. Any point in theory can kind of keep going on its own. So that's very good, right? It means that somebody can't go and shut down any part of it. It will keep going. And I mean, if you're talking about Ethereum as an example, which is the second largest, I think it's like 9,000 nodes around the world right now. So that gives you some idea of like, you're not going to take down 9,000 nodes. You could take down 3,000 nodes. You could take down 5,000 nodes. It wouldn't matter. It would keep going. And these are all over the world. That gives you a tremendous degree of security, okay? At the same time, the cryptography and the way that blockchain works is very, very useful for being like hacking resistant. So whereas somebody could hack into your bank account at the bank and they could, in theory, withdraw your money, the same thing is extraordinarily difficult to do. It's much, much more secure, much more robust on the blockchain. Okay, so that's very good. That being said, your funds, you want to know it's always there in the blockchain. And the blockchain is kind of like the cloud, right? It's not like you're carrying it in your pocket. So basically what you can imagine is you can just imagine this record of all these transactions, okay? And these transactions have a wallet address associated with them, okay? So there's some, money is stored in this wallet, and anyone can create a wallet. Okay, it's super simple to create a wallet just like that. Nobody needs any special anything. It can be done. Okay. Now, typically you would do that via some sort of a service or a site or whatever, but theoretically, it's just done via code. So that's the one thing, is that there is this address. Okay, and the key is that you have to access that address in order to be able to do anything to it. Okay, or rather to be able to withdraw from it. Okay, so you can send to that address, right? You can basically access the contents of one of these addresses, right? And then you can do a transaction to send from that address to this address. To do anything on this address, you need to have a cryptographic key. So there's two keys, okay? There's what we call a public key and a private key. The public key is basically your wallet address. And there's this really interesting thing, which is that the methodology used, without getting into kind of like the sophisticated mathematics of it, the public key can be derived from the private key, but not vice versa. Okay, so there's a mathematical way that if you have the private key, you can access the public key, but if you have the public key, you can't access the private key. And that's this key thing for you. So you always need to keep your private keys safe. Okay, your private key is what allows you to access the funds that are associated with that address. And then once you send them there somewhere, great. Now here's an interesting thing. You can actually send money to an address that more or less doesn't exist, and that's really bad, right? It's what we would consider burning tokens. In theory, they're just lost into the ether, unless by some weird randomness somebody could generate a key that could access that random address. But more or less, that's not the case. So what happens is when you're getting started, it's not like you will sometimes have a PIN code or some sort of a password which allows you to access your private key. Okay, but in theory, this is not necessary. Okay, in theory, what you have is your private key. Your private key is what gives you access to your money. You want to keep that very safe. And if you lose it, you're screwed. There's no password recovery. There's no any of this. That's part of the whole point of crypto. Crypto is very much about like your responsibility. So whereas in a lot of cases, if you go to a bank, if you're using some online service, there's some centralized service that has the power to reset your password. They have the power to reverse transactions, etc. This is not the case on blockchain. On blockchain, for the most part, in particular on Bitcoin, if you do a transaction, it's done. That's it. It's irreversible. That's it. And if you lose your key, nobody can find it for you. You can't reset it. You can't do anything. It's a function of the mathematics of the system that allows the private key to access the public key. Okay, so yeah, that's this thing that's kind of, it's a little bit different in terms of how you understand it, because normally you think about, hey, listen, I create a username and then I create a password for it. Here these are kind of like connected, because you create the private key which generates the public key, basically. Like they're intrinsically linked, and it's not changeable. What will happen is that you will often have some piece of software that protects access to your private key. So this is where, if you have MetaMask or something like that, right? MetaMask will, have a username and password login for you, which will allow you to go in and then you get access, and within there, that's basically connected to your private keys. Similarly, if you're using an exchange, you're registered on Binance or something like that, you'll have a username and password to get into Binance, and inside Binance there will be various different wallet addresses for your various crypto that you have. Now in that case, you don't actually have the private keys to your wallets. Those are all stored with Binance, so this is potentially a concern, right? They can be hacked, they could steal the money, they could do all this kind of thing. But that's how it is. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, what about hardware wallets? Okay, I'll talk about hardware wallets. Or actually, maybe I'll leave that for another video. But basically, there's this idea that you should have a hardware wallet. Now, what a hardware wallet is supposed to do is to protect your keys. So just think, there's this expression in crypto, which is your keys, your coins, right? Which is if nobody else has those keys, they can't access it. Now, of course, somebody could threaten you for that. They could do all kinds of stuff like this. But barring that, you have the keys to your wallet, boom, you're good. The problem is, what happens if you get hacked, okay? Let's say that you've stored your key on your computer in some form, and somebody hacks into your computer. They could get that key information. And there's a variety of different ways that that can be done. Now, realistically, for most people, the likelihood that that happens is pretty slim, right? However, it is a possibility. So this brings us to a hardware wallet. And a hardware wallet, again, I think is kind of interesting because people think of it as, hey, I'm like somehow taking the money out. You're not taking the money out, okay? The money is always, or the tokens are always on the blockchain, okay? What it's doing is it's storing your private key in this little device, okay? It's like you plug it in through a USB. And what happens is you then have a piece of software that when you want to do a transaction, it will basically send that transaction. You can think about this like you have to write a check, okay? So you're writing a check to transfer money. And normally what you do is you just sign the check on your computer. Well, the problem is if you apply your signature on your computer, someone else could gain access and they could grab your signature basically, and then they could go and use that in the future, right? That's your risk. In the case of a hardware wallet, what happens is this hardware wallet does virtually nothing. It can't store information, it can't access the internet, it can't all this. The only thing that it can do is it can receive these transactions from your computer via the USB into there, and then what it does is it contains your signature and it applies the signature. So nobody sees the signature, okay? Then it sends it back to your computer and it's already signed. So imagine this, and this is kind of hard to understand because of the fact that normally you would think that your signature, you know, it's like, hey, I can see your signature. Well, that's not exactly how it works here when you have a cryptographic key. Okay, so for a cryptographic key, I'll try and explain this for you. Let's say that you have colors is probably an easy example. So you've got all sorts of different squares that are different colors, okay? Now, those colors can be derived from a variety of combinations of colors, okay? So if you just think about it, let's say there was a code, say we're talking about values that go 0 to 255, right? This is a common color code thing. And so how do you get to 148, right? Well, you could get to 148 by combining, you know, 142 with 6, or you could get to there by combining 128 with, what is that, 20 or 18, right? So like, there's different ways that you could get there, right? I don't know if I forgot the numbers which I'm talking about, but anyway, the whole point is just there's different combinations that would get you to those numeric values, right? And there's a whole bunch of them. So the private key, because of the fact that you see this thing, the end information, the end colors are like a signed message, okay? But if you don't have if you can't reverse that with the private key, then you don't know that it's going to match, right? You can't, basically, let's say that you had another combination, right? Say that you got the combination wrong. Say you said in this case it was 146 or something. So let's say that the correct combination of your key, that digit, because let's say each of these is a digit, just for a simple example, okay? Then let's say that your first number is a 2, right? And so would have meant that the previous information that went along with that, right, it would be 2 plus 144, right, would equal to 146. And there's no way of knowing that I got to 146 by the combination of 2 and 144. Now, if you only had 1, that would be, you know, you could crack that just by brute force, right? But when you have this whole string that's extraordinarily complex, then it's virtually impossible to navigate, okay? So I'm trying to give like an analogy that makes sense here. And so then they don't know. But if they see on your computer, oh, his numbers are 2, 4, 56, 38, blah, 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 right? Then they can do that, right? So what happens is there's a transaction, like some information that goes into there. Then you apply your key to this and it spits out a new piece of information, right? That's the signed transaction. And now that gets put into the blockchain, okay? And provided that's proper, you know, it will record the transaction and off you will go. So the whole point is, if somebody had hacked your computer, they can't see what is on this hardware wallet, okay? They can only see what's on your computer. And so when the transaction goes onto your hardware wallet, the hardware wallet digitally signs it, okay, and then spits it back out. Now you have this transaction. So that's how it's more secure. So I hope I'm explaining this kind of well. It's cryptography I find is fairly complex. So, trying to make sense of it is a big deal. But anyway, why is this important? Okay, there's a few things that I want you to understand about this that are relevant. Number one, the people who make the hardware wallets do not have your key, okay? Or they shouldn't. So basically, you should get it at the beginning, and so they shouldn't have it. Just because they manufactured that thing, it's not like they keep a list of all the keys and program this key into this wallet and send it to you. It doesn't work that way, okay? So that's fine. Also, what happens if the hardware wallet manufacturer were to, go out of business? It's fine, because the information is not stored on their system, right? It's not like you're losing their system somehow, right? It doesn't connect to their system in order to do this. That's not how this works, right? Also, what would happen if you lost that hardware wallet? Well, that would be bad. But in theory, you could have the information. So usually what happens when you're getting a Bitcoin address is you'll have these words, right? And so if you have these words, then you can basically restore your information. So that's part of the details here. And so you could, in theory, have this hardware wallet stolen. Now, normally what you'd have is you'd have some sort of like a PIN associated with the hardware wallet that would prevent somebody else from just using it, okay? It is possible that it was stolen and now somebody else can utilize it to access your tokens, right? Very bad, very bad. And even if you have a PIN, the reality is that if they punch the PIN in, and basically they could in theory brute force it, and they could in theory utilize it. So if you were to lose your hardware wallet, or it was stolen or something, what you would want to do is immediately go access your crypto, okay? So basically you would restore your private keys with your keywords, right? Your phrase. You would want to then take that and you would want to transfer that crypto to another address. And then based on that, then the old one couldn't access it because it would be transferred. Okay, so anyway, I hope that helps. I hope I explained that somewhat clearly, and you just kind of realize that your funds is always a record on this decentralized, on the blockchain ledger. It's not with you, okay? So when somebody takes it, they don't take that. What they're taking is your private keys, which allow them to access your address, okay? Second of all, you don't have a username and password like normally. What you have is you have a private key, and the private key can then allow you to access the public key, okay? So, and then the hardware wallet, what happens is that it's preventing somebody from being able to see what your private keys are on your computer by sending the transactions into the hardware wallet, then digitally signing them, then spitting them back out, and then posting it up to the blockchain. So anyway, I hope that helps. If it does or doesn't, whatever, let me know in the comments. If there's something you can add, fantastic, would love to hear it. But I think it's an important subject because generally people who are like really into the security of their funds, you would want to get a hardware wallet. So I always recommend you should first of all not store your crypto on like an exchange or something. You should ideally have it in your private wallet. Don't buy it through PayPal. Don't buy it through Grayscale, for God's sake. Don't do any of these sorts of things. Have your Bitcoin, have it in your wallet, and then have a hardware wallet in order to protect it. And that's like the most secure way. Now, in reality, the likelihood that something's going to happen to you if you have, a small amount of money or something like that, maybe isn't so great. But an important part of your general cybersecurity that would help you to be out there. So anyway, hope that helps. If you would like information about this and all the other topics that we discussed, like I said, investing, citizenships, residencies, tax planning, asset protection, et cetera, reach out to me, carter.fm/Michael Rosmer, link below, or check out our websites, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com. And let me know how you liked the video. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it. If not, state below. And I'm going to see you guys on the next video.